Good evening. Tonight, ICPC recovers 2.67 billion naira school feeding funds in private accounts as President Buhari insists corruption must be tackled squarely in Nigeria. Organized labor suspend planned industrial action for 2 weeks after about 8 hours of negotiation with the federal government. Some unionists kick against the decision. Ahead of the nation's 60th independence anniversary, we begin our assessment of Nigeria's developmental strides since 1960, with focus on the economy today. And the World Health Organization says new global COVID-19 tests will give results in minutes as cases in India top 6 million. Plus, business, sports, and later from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, federal government set to investigate revenue inflows and remittances made by its agencies between 2016 and 2019.
On sports news tonight, defending champion Rafael Nadal strolls into the second round of the French Open after straight sets victory over Belarusian Igor Gerasimov.
Following the discovery of 2.67 billion naira misappropriated from the school feeding program, President Muhammadu Buhari is reaffirming his commitment to eradicating corruption in the country. The president recited this goal in Abuja as an event to mark the 20th anniversary of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission and Nigeria's 60th independence anniversary. His position remains that if corruption is not eradicated, the menace would kill the country.
It's the second annual National Summit of the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission with the theme, Together Against Corruption.
I wish to reiterate
President Buhari takes the podium as he recounts how he fought corruption as a military head of state.
As military head of state, I fought corruption headlong and held public officers who abused their offices or misuse public funds to account. We must all join hands together to fight corruption and return to our traditional values of honesty and integrity. I hereby use the opportunity of this summit to launch the National Ethics and Integrity Policy as a fresh roadmap to return Nigeria to these critical national values.
With the president's insistence that Nigeria needs a corruption-free public sector to achieve transformation, the chairman of the ICPC presents a score sheet of recent recoveries made by the commission.
We discovered payments to federal colleges, secondary schools for school feeding, amounting to 2.67 billion during the lockdown when children were not in school, and some of this money we traced ended up in personal accounts. We have arrested those who are involved, and investigations are ongoing to who they fed when children were at home and there was a lockdown.
The 9th National Assembly have
The President of the Senate gives legislative backing to the anti-graft body as he highlights the position of the National Assembly on the fight against corruption.
As a conscious and patriotic assembly, the 9th National Assembly has passed several important legislations to advance the social and economic well-being of our country.
With the speech is over, President Buhari recognizes and commends the winner of the Anti-Corruption Music Award, Opeyemi Adeboye, winner of the Junior Secondary School Competition, Chikezie Favor, and winner of the Senior Secondary School Competition. He also presents the 2020 Public Service Integrity Awards to Francis Erabo, a Chief Superintendent of Police, and Hamza Bouai of the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment.
What it seemed to be an inevitable end was averted at the 11th hour as organized labor has suspended its planned industrial action and nationwide protests over the hike in petrol pump price and electricity tariff. The decision to suspend the strike for 2 weeks was reached early today after hours of negotiations between the federal government and labor unions at the banquet hall of the State House in Abuja. Electricity distribution companies have been directed to immediately suspend their new tariff, while the new pump price of petrol remains. Our State House correspondent, Kayla Megwa, reports.
The country waited for the clock to strike midnight on Sunday, the 27th of September. Organized labor in the country had threatened a nationwide strike action accompanied by massive protests across the country if the hike in fuel and electricity prices were not reversed by midnight of the 27th. While the government and organized labor bickered, the masses waited with bated breaths for the impact this strike would have on the already diminished resources.
Emergency meeting.
This in mind, both parties attempt a last-ditch effort to avert the crisis. One more meeting after a series of protests, threats and court orders.
As we sit here,
it starts off a bit rocky with accusations and counter-accusations.
At our last meeting, which the press described as deadlocked, I don't think it was deadlocked. I made it clear that we put proposals on the table, and the labor centers said they will go home and fine-tune those proposals to suit their own needs.
Labour, because of the fact that we are passionate on this issue, particularly the hike in electricity tariff, you remembered we had to seek judicial pronouncement. And as I speak, we have a system judgment of the court, Federal High Court Lagos, that said the increase is illegal and therefore it should be set aside.
It was wrong for governments to have sponsored some people, good people of Nigeria, to protest at the Eagle Square or where Unity Fountain, that the labor movement should not go on strike.
They go into a technical session excusing the media so they can properly iron out the details of their impasse.
You can excuse us for maybe 30 minutes.
At about 3 a.m. after hours of deliberations, both parties come to an understanding, signing an MOU which first of all suspends the planned strike action for 2 weeks, while a committee is set up to look into justification for the hike in electricity tariff, and the government works on plans to revive the downstream sector.
To cushion the impact of the downstream sector deregulation and tariff adjustments in the power sector, the federal government will implement the following. 1. Specific amount to be unveiled by the federal government in 2 weeks' time and will be selected from the Economic Sustainability Program, ESP, Intervention Fund, and be assessed by Nigerian workers with subsequent provision for 240,000 of them benefiting under the auspices of NSC and TUC. The federal government will also facilitate the removal of tax on minimum wage as a way of cushioning the impacts of the policy on the lowest vulnerable persons. Consequently, the NSC and the TUC have this night agreed to suspend the planned industrial action with effect from this moment.
Organized labor is quick to point out the strike has not been called off. It's only been suspended, pending when the government will make good on the promises it has made.
All agreements here shall be followed up. And what that means is that if the agreement is not being followed up as agreed here, we may not need another notice before we proceed on strike. So it's a suspension. It's not call off of strike.
So the federal government have reprieve for 2 weeks. For the masses, they must continue to cope with the new pump price of petrol, while they await the palliatives promised to cushion the effect of the new price. From the State House in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Away from the industrial action, the 36 states of the Federation have dragged the federal government before the Supreme Court, challenging the Presidential Executive Order number 00-110 of 2020, signed in May by the President. The states are seeking an order of the court quashing the executive order on the funding of courts for being unconstitutional. Listed as the sole respondent is the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Abubakar Malami. The suit is filed on their behalf by 9 senior advocates of Nigeria, led by a former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Mr. Augustine Alege. They claim that by virtue of the executive order, the president had pushed the federal government's responsibility of funding both the capital and recurrent expenditure of the state high courts, Sharia courts of appeal, and the customary courts of appeal to the state governments. They're also asking the Apex Court to order the federal government to make a refund to them, claiming that they had been funding the capital projects on the listed courts since 2009. Staying with judicial matters, the High Court of the Federal Capital Territory sitting in Maitama has awarded 50 million naira damages against Senator Elisha Abo as compensation to a female attendant at a sex toy shop whom he assaulted. Justice Samira Bature gave the order in her judgment on the fundamental rights enforcement instituted by Osimi Bibra Wamate against the senator representing Adamawa North. A magistrate court in Zuba, Abuja had earlier dismissed the one-count charge of assaulting Mrs. Wamate filed by the police in 2019 after upholding the no-case submission filed by Senator Abo. But the complainant, through her legal team, went on to sue Senator Abo in a fundamental rights enforcement suit before the FCT High Court. And at the National Assembly, the federal government has been given more details about the petroleum industry bill that President Buhari transmitted to the National Assembly. Speaking to journalists after an interactive meeting with the leadership of the National Assembly today, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timipriye Silva, says the PIB seeks the commercialization and not the scrapping of the NNPC.
The bill that has been long in the making. We will pass this bill speedily. However, with a caveat, its passage will not be, we will not sacrifice thoroughness. Let me repeat, we will not sacrifice thoroughness at the altar of speed. Speed because it's long coming, because we need it. And it will be in the nation's best interest.
I've heard a lot of noise about NNPC being scrapped, but that is not envisaged by the bill at all. We have said that NNPC will be commercialized. But if we are talking about transforming the industry, the only new thing that we are introducing is the development of the midstream. That is the pipeline sector, that sector between the upstream and the downstream.
In part two, after the break, analysts ask National Assembly to tackle burning national issues as the federal lawmakers resume from the 2-month recess. Join us again. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. ICPC uncovers 2.67 billion naira school feeding funds paid into private accounts as President Buhari insists the corruption must be tackled squarely in Nigeria. Organized labor suspends planned industrial action for 2 weeks after about 8 hours of negotiation with the federal government. Ahead of the nation's 60th independence anniversary, we begin our assessment of Nigeria's developmental strides since 1960 with focus on the economy today. And the World Health Organization says new global COVID-19 tests will give results in minutes as cases in India top 6 million. Plus sports, business sports, and later from our studios in London. The National Assembly is set to resume tomorrow, Tuesday, September 29th, after a long recess. But ahead of the resumption, some Nigerians are asking federal legislators to jump right into the business of offering legislative support to the federal government to tackle the economic crisis in the country. Our correspondent, Linda Kigbe, has more.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives inspecting the newly installed digital system in the House chamber. This is ahead of the resumption of plenary session in the National Assembly as Parliament resumes on Tuesday, September 29, after a 2-month recess. Federal lawmakers will be resuming at a time when Nigerians are groaning under the weight of an increase in fuel and electricity prices, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic.
We want to see the National Assembly, when they resume, that will tackle the issues that are currently hitting up the social economy. I'm not talking of politics now. You know the issues. Labor is gone down tools. This country is under threat to shut down, by organized labor. We expect that they will pick up from that shame, resume and address the issue of subsidy removal, whatever it is, by the executive.
For observers of the legislature, on resumption, lawmakers must immediately give priority attention to the economy worsened by dwindling revenue exacerbated by COVID-19.
Nigeria is struggling, to earn an income, as a nation. So, National Assembly should prioritize how they can, support the executive arm. Look at these interventions, look at what these figures, these interventions have been thrown around by the executive arm. How can we help?
With almost 2 years into the 9th Assembly, a lawyer urges federal legislators to amend the Electoral Act and send it to President Buhari for assent in enough time for the 2023 elections.
We don't have the comfort of time. So I would like to see them go headlong into the business of making sure that they are. And the basic area I think they should be focusing on is the issue of the card reader. It must be integrated legally into our legal jurisprudence, into our electoral jurisprudence.
Critical bills such as the Petroleum Industry Bill and the amendment of the Electoral Act have so far not been introduced in the National Assembly, causing some Nigerians to worry that the country may again be cheated out of having these important legislations intended to sanitize the petroleum sector and the country's electoral process. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
The political situation in neighboring Mali is of concern to President Buhari. He has hinted that the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, heads of state and government, may be conferring again to discuss outstanding grey areas in that country. President Buhari gave this indication after receiving a briefing from the ECOWAS Special Envoy to Mali, former President Goodluck Jonathan, at the State House in Abuja. A statement from the presidency acknowledges that a civilian has been appointed as Mali's interim president to lead the country back to civil rule as part of conditions for lifting sanctions. But the military leaders are yet to satisfy ECOWAS' demand of a full civilian as vice president and what his roles would be in the government. President Buhari has therefore asked Dr. Jonathan to present a formal report to the new ECOWAS chairman, President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, whose official communication will determine the next step leaders will take. Nigeria's economy is one of the largest in Africa, and since the late 1960s, its revenue base is primarily dependent on oil resources. A series of global oil price increases, otherwise referred to as the oil boom, from 1973 triggered rapid growth in transportation, construction, manufacturing, and government services. Despite the abundant natural and human resources, Nigeria has continued to depend on oil to fund its development plans. As the country marks its 60th independence anniversary, we take a look at how the nation can fast-track its economic growth.
Nigeria is ranked 8th among the nations with the largest crude oil reserve in the world. It's endowed with a human population estimated at about 200 million people and about 37 solid minerals. But at the moment, Nigeria's economic performance does not reflect these endowments.
The ability of government to steer this country into development is limited in terms of spending, and its best option is to spend a lot of time on business environment reform and invite private sector investment into these areas. Why was Nigeria successful in the pre-oil period? It was diversification.
While successive governments between 1960 to date have developed various policies to drive economic development, it appears that little has been achieved as economic indices have continued on the downward trend 60 years after independence. A comparison between Nigeria, South Korea and Malaysia between 1960 and 2020 using macroeconomic indicators such as the gross domestic product suggests some level of improvement, although a lot more can be done. Economists make suggestions on how regional economies can be empowered to improve the economy.
Never. Let this government say enough is enough. We are tomorrow creating 5 or 6 regional economies. Give it legal teeth. We want each legal economy to tell us its area of interest. Agriculture, manufacturing, finance, technology, just name it. Government will sit down with each region and say, you know what, this is the economy of this country. It's worth 300 trillion. We are giving you 20 trillion, not cash. But each time you show us need, we release the money.
What we have done as a country is that we have not been able to develop something that is truly indigenous, okay, that can be able to develop us based on our resources, based on our human capital, based on our technologies.
For the government, greater emphasis is now being laid on economic diversification, revenue generation, and the adoption of sound fiscal policies. All of these are expected to boost the economy.
We have eliminated cash collections because that is a huge area of leakages. We still have a lot of work to do in other areas, in other government revenue collecting agencies, to make sure that their processes become more efficient and that the targets that are set for them on an annual basis are reached. We continue to work to expand the tax net and find new sources of revenues to augment the existing revenue streams.
While key macroeconomic indicators reveal that the economy has grossly underperformed relative to the country's enormous resources and its peer nations, it's pertinent for the government to take urgent steps to make all sectors contribute towards socio-economic development.
Let's now discuss the issue further. We've been joined live on the news at 10 from our Abuja studio by an economic analyst and professor of capital market from the Nasarawa State University, Professor Uche Owaleke. Thank you for joining us on the news at 10.
Yeah, thank you, Amarachi. It's my pleasure.
60 years after independence, how would you describe the state of the Nigerian economy?
Well, let me start from the sunny side. Looking at the telecom sector, for example, the music, the entertainment industry, including the financial sector that has been through trying times and today has emerged stronger. You know, one has something to cheer. But if you look at the overall economic development indices, it's quite nothing to write home about. Whether you're looking at the stock of infrastructure in Nigeria, just about 35% of GDP. Compare that to South Africa's over 80%. Or you're looking at income per capita. In your background report, you talked about Malaysia. Yes, Malaysia and Nigeria were more or less contemporaries in the 60s. You can also add countries like Singapore, Indonesia, even South Korea. But today, what is the story? They have left us behind. So Nigeria is lagging behind in many human development indicators. Overall standard of living, generally. So I think if you look at it overall, as I said earlier on, we have a long way to go.
And how do we play catch up at this point? How do we then ensure that economic growth is commensurate with the population growth, which is currently accelerating faster than economic growth?
Yes, if you look at the development plans we've had, over the years since 1960, the first one was 62 to 68, We also had 70 to 74, 75 to 80, 81 to 85. And we've had other economic roadmap maps, since then, whether you're talking about the SAP, the NEET, the Vision 2010, Vision 2020, and now the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. You will notice a common string running through all of them. And that's talking about diversification of the economy away from oil. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Today, oil still accounts for over 90% of our forex earnings. And because of our overexposure, because of the vulnerability, a lot of other things are, they are distorted. So for me, the burn is largely implementation, implementation of these plans. And it's also stemming from political instability, which is why one of the recommendations I want to make here is that the 4-year election cycle, for me, is a drag on economic growth. If it's possible, let's have a single term of 6 years for governors and presidents. That will go a long way to solve this problem, because what you find is that somebody is elected into office, the first 2 years he tries to settle in, the third day he begins to worry about the second term. So if you can have a single term of 6 years, that will go a long way to handle this challenge. So for me, that's major. The other thing also has to do with investing in our people, just as the ERGP mentioned. If you look at the economic sustainability plan, a good number of things have come up there. For example, government is talking about mass housing, mass housing, where it talks about having about 300,000 housing units on an annual basis. Okay, so that requires sustainability. And one of the ways we can sustain this, including the new ERGP they want to come up with now, is to find a way of safeguarding these economic plans. And one way we can safeguard the economic plans is to have a legal backing, that safeguards them. The country of Puerto Rico, for example, to make sure that its economic development plan is safeguarded, had to pass a law, the Economic Revitalization Bill, okay, which eventually, of course, became an act. So we can do the same here, because if we don't do that, the tendency or the likelihood is that a successive government, coming in would jettison the plan and then come up with its own plan. So one may argue that after all we have the Fiscal Responsibility Act. But remember too, that act is only about budget and medium-term expenditure frameworks, which must derive from the plan. So if the plan is not ring-fenced, using a law, then it becomes difficult to have continuity, to have sustainability, especially if the incumbent leaves office. So for me, political instability is one, and we should find a way of us making sure that whatever plan we have in place is implemented even by successive administrations.
Professor Uche Waleke, thank you again for joining us tonight. Appreciate your thoughts and your analysis on the issue.
Pleasure, thanks.
When the News at 10 returns, federal government to investigate revenue inflows and remittances made by its agencies between 2016 and 2019. That will be on Business News. Join us again. Welcome back. We go from the economy to political matters. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, is taking a step closer to electronic voting and collation of results with a demonstration by over 40 manufacturers of e-voting machines in Abuja. INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu notes that the demonstration is the first in a series of steps to take towards the introduction of e-voting in Nigeria's electoral system. Meanwhile, a coalition of civil society groups in Abuja is asking the National Assembly to reintroduce and pass the 2018 electoral bill into law in order to provide for e-voting and e-collation of results, among others.
the Commission has been working on the deployment of technology in voting during elections to replace the current manual system, which is tedious and requires enormous logistics. The Commission is aware that Nigerians want us to deepen the use of technology in elections. Let me reassure each and every Nigerian that the Commission is committed to expediting the process leading to the deployment of electronic voting machines in elections in earnest.
Staying with politics, while there is another twist in the Edo State House of Assembly saga, with the embattled Deputy Speaker, Mr. Yakini Idiaye, returning to the group loyal to Governor Godwin Obaseki, led by the Speaker of the House, Mr. Francis Okie. Mr. Idiaye is joined by the lawmakers representing Akoko Edo Constituency 2 and Oriowon East, and who had previously declared their support for the APC candidate during the governorship election. After a solidarity visit to Governor Obaseki at the Government House in Benin, the Speaker, Mr. Okie, insists the House is not divided. And with the House of Assembly solidly behind him, following his victory at the governorship election, the Governor has formally dissolved the PDP campaign organization. A Lagos-based real estate company, Henry Montego Homes and Industries, has begun the process of constructing residential houses in the Lekki area of Lagos. The groundbreaking ceremony for the project, called Montego Bay 4, was performed by the managing director of the company, Henry Ebulofo. Mr. Ebulofo explained that the project demonstrates his company's commitment to providing comfort and affordable luxury to Nigerians.
Look up.
By turning the first sword, the construction of Montego Bay 4 housing project commences officially. A 3D layout of Montego Bay 4 shows a distribution of a variety of apartment types, including 4-bedroom semi-detached and terrace duplexes located within a gated community in Ikati. Besides the houses, the developer promises to deliver an estate with state-of-the-art amenities like good road network and drainage system, treated water plant, 24-hour backup electricity, swimming pool, among others.
Our goal is to see average young men and women, Nigerians, who work so hard to have their home in a comfort and spread their payment across 20 years. So the vision of Henry Montego is to impact in every area of our lives, okay, to bring comfort, quality, and affordability.
The quality of Montego's previous projects and payment plan are primed to attract prospective buyers.
It made more realistic sense in given the current environment where we work in. It's difficult for people to raise 100% of cash to pay for a house, and the payment plan just makes it very comfortable and affordable.
You hardly can see a state in Lekki area that has this payment structure and has all this luxury of, shopping mall being, within your neighborhood.
So now you're tied to the closet. The groundbreaking ceremony is graced by celebrities who are also brand ambassadors for Henry Montego Homes.
I mean, the fact that they gave everyone opportunity to pay for 5 years is a big deal. I really don't know any other person that is doing it. Especially but this do you understand? Especially this area, island. Trust me, if you hear Henry Montego, run and be part of it.
For those who love luxury, Henry Montego is saying you can own your dream home with as low as 5.7 million initial deposit, with the balance spread across 5 years. Construction period is between 11 and 18 months.
That takes us to business news now. Here's Bisi Adebayo. Welcome to Business News.
The federal government is set to investigate revenue generated and remitted into the Federation account by its agencies between 2016 and 2019. The chairman of the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, Elias Mbam, told journalists in Abuja that the measure is aligned with the Commission's mandate to monitor and block all revenue leakages while maximizing inflows into the Federation account. Mr. Mbam says a nationwide verification and reconciliation on revenue inflows and remittances from relevant organizations to the appropriate government treasury will be carried out in the first week of October. It mentions that the financial records of some government agencies will be scrutinized by the Commission in partnership with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission. Some of the federal ministries, departments and agencies of government are alleged to have withheld revenue generated which are accrued to the Federation account. The National Bureau of Statistics is set to commence the 2020 National Business Sample Census from October the 12th to December the 12th this year, exactly 22 years after the last business census was conducted in the country. According to the Statistician General of the NBS, Yemi Kale, the survey is necessary owing to the efforts by the federal government to restructure the economy for faster growth through increased productivity for micro, small, and medium enterprises. Let's head to the markets now. Increased demand by investors for high-value equities pushed the local burst further to a positive start for the week. And that's its seventh consecutive increase as the month-to-date gain rises to 4.7% at the close of today's trading on the NSE. Ekaite Afia has the details.
Thank you for joining us for the Stock Market Report. So far, September has been quite a rewarding month for the investors at the local equities market. And this is because the bulls extended their dominance over the bears from 5 sessions last week into the first of the last 3 days of this month. Now, at the close of today's trading session, the NSE's main index closed the day up by 0.72%, starting off a new week with a hangover of bargain hunting for stocks, followed by increased participation from portfolio investors. So let's take a look at this. The 5 key sectors of listed equities, in particular the oil and gas, finished in the green after 27 gainers led by Total outperformed 7 losers led by UAC Properties. Now, at the same time, total volume of equities traded today increased further by 0.3% to more than 336.8 million units. And these were largely driven by the shares of Zenith, Sterling Bank, and UBA. Meanwhile, traders say although the market is currently living up to expectations, the best is yet to come. Well, that's all for the Stock Market Report. I'm Ekaite Afia.
And that's it on Business News. It's back to Amarachi.
Thanks, BC. Still ahead on the news at 10. The World Health Organization says new global COVID-19 tests will give results in minutes as cases in India top 6 million. Plus, more stories from our London studio and around the world in 5. Stay with us. The World Health Organization is promoting a test it says can accurately diagnose the coronavirus in minutes and will dramatically expand testing in low and middle income countries. It costs $5 and drugs manufacturers Abbott and SD Biosensor have agreed with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to produce 120 million of the test. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. The US President Donald Trump has paid no income taxes in 10 of the last 15 years. That's according to a recent report by the New York Times. The newspaper has also said that Trump paid just $750 in federal income tax, both in 2016, the year he ran for presidency, and in his first year in the White House. The revelation comes just days before a presidential debate between Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden, and weeks before the 3rd of November election. Trump has called the report fake news.
It's fake news. It's totally fake news. Made up, fake. we went through the same stories. You could have asked me the same questions 4 years ago. I had to litigate this and talk about it. Totally fake news. No, actually, I paid tax. And you'll see that as soon as my tax returns. It's under audit. They've been under audit for a long time. The IRS does not treat me well. They treat me like the Tea Party, like they treated the Tea Party.
Fierce fighting between Armenian and Azerbaijani forces has raged on in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region, with each side claiming an upper hand. The region is internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but is run by ethnic Armenians. The separatist authorities there have said that 31 of their soldiers have now died, and some lost positions have been retaken. Azerbaijan has said 26 civilians have been injured in heavy Armenian shelling, and at least 5 people have died. Both Armenia and Azerbaijan have already declared general mobilization and martial law in some areas. Tens of thousands of Spanish flags have been placed in a park in the capital Madrid to honour those who have died during the coronavirus pandemic. A group representing coronavirus victims have planted around 53,000 red and gold flags in the city's Roma Park. More than 31,000 people have died with the coronavirus since it reached Spain. That's according to figures from Johns Hopkins University. Further areas of Madrid have been brought under lockdown measures as the city struggles to control a second wave of infections. Meanwhile, the number of COVID-19 cases in India has passed 6 million, which is the second highest tally in the world after the US. The rise in infections comes as the government continues to lift restrictions to try to boost an economy badly hit by lockdown measures. Another wildfire has erupted in California, spreading across more than 2,000 acres in the state's northern Napa Valley wine country, forcing the evacuation of several hundred homes and a hospital. The worst wildfires in 18 years have raged across California since August. They've been responsible for more than 30 deaths and driven thousands of people from their homes. The cause of the fires have become a political football, with California Governor Gavin Newsom blaming climate change, but President Trump has instead been pointing to land management practices as the key driver. An Australian theme park has been fined $3.6 million over the deaths of 4 people on a malfunctioning water ride. Kate Goodchild, Luke Dorset, Rusba Oragi and Cindy Lowe died in October 2016 when their raft crashed into another and overturned, crushing them. The accident at Australia's biggest theme park, Dreamworld, was caused by a pump that malfunctioned near the end of the ride. The company said it accepted responsibility and had worked to improve safety standards.
I wanted to be here today to say that Arden apologises unreservedly for the past circumstances and failures at Dreamworld that resulted in the tragic loss of 4 lives, and for the ongoing impact and that this terrible tragedy has had on so many people.
A Malian diplomat has been named as the country's interim prime minister in a move that will likely prompt the lifting of sanctions imposed following a military coup last month. Mokhtar Ouane was previously Mali's ambassador to the United Nations and the country's foreign minister. The appointment of civilians to the top jobs of Mali's transition has been a demand of the Economic Community of West African Nations, which cut off financial flows and closed borders after the August the 18th ousting of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. And finally, for the first time at Milan Fashion Week, a show dedicated to black Italian designers was part of the official calendar. The We Are Made in Italy digital show has been broadcast online and showcases the spring and summer 2021 collections of 5 selected designers of colour who have previously struggled to get a foot in the door in the industry. Organisers hope the initiative will highlight the lack of diversity in the fashion world.
It is very important for us to show that the words "made in Italy" do not correspond to a particular colour. We want to destroy the prejudice that being Italian means being white.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon. We get started with football. Liverpool demonstrated their determination to retain an iron grip on the Premier League crown by coming from behind to record an impressive 3-1 victory over Arsenal at Anfield. The Reds were superior in the game as the Gunners spent most of the time defending deep in their own half. And in tennis, clay court master Rafael Nadal started his quest for a record-extending 13th French Open title with a straightforward 6-4, 6-4, 6-2 first-round win against Belarusian Igor Gerasimov on the revamped Philippe Chatrier court, which roof stayed open throughout. Naval converted all of his 5 break points to set up a meeting with American Mackenzie McDonald. That's it on Sports News. Amarachi, back to you.
Thanks, Olumide. And the main news again. The Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Offences Commission, the ICPC, today revealed that it uncovered 2.67 billion naira school feeding funds paid into private accounts, even as President Muhammadu Buhari insisted that corruption must be tackled squarely in Nigeria. That is the news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Good night.